All right, welcome back. In this lesson, we're going to look at the fall of the Roman Empire. And as we do this, I want to really kind of reiterate just how important the Roman Empire really was and how its fall or decline really impacted the future of what Europe and the Mediterranean landscape would look like over the next couple hundred years. A lot of historians debate whether we should use the word fall or, decline of the empire. In either case, we should probably, regardless of which word we use, decline or fall, we should focus on the fact that this is happening to the western part of the Roman Empire. And there's several reasons why we start to see the power of the Roman Empire beginning to collapse in the western part. One of these factors that we've already mentioned is the division of the empire between east and west. While Constantine had come along and reunified the empire together under his leadership, we then get the reign of Emperor Theodosius, and the empire gets divided once again. Then they go back and try and use this system of tetrarchy, and we have, again, the divide between the eastern half of the empire and the western half. So automatically, that brings back this idea that the eastern half is more important than the western half. Secondly, we still have continued problems of political instability and corruption. Theodosius is trying to fight off people who are trying to take the throne away from him during his rule. And the later emperors of both the East and West are having to deal with this. There's also the continued problems of economic decline. The Roman emperors are increasing taxes, but they still can't cover their expenses. It's in part, it's because they're no longer expanding. So they don't have the spoils of war that are coming into the empire to help fund and run the government. And so we start to find that it's more difficult for them to pay the military, and of course they need the military support. Because of these tax issues and economic issues, we also see a problem of inflation taking place. So prices are rising within the empire. Another issue is the fact that the Roman Empire has really overexpanded. They have a huge amount of territory, but they now have to defend all of this territory. And so a great deal of their expenses involved is having to spend money on military support to protect the empire. We mentioned that one of the solutions to this problem is to hire barbarians to try and help them protect the empire, but this is only a short-term solution. When they start to run out of money to pay the barbarians, then the barbarians can turn around and attack, which kind of, in a way, leads us to this very fast period of decline in the West, because we start to see an increased number of these Germanic barbarian groups coming into the empire. Now, they're coming into the empire. It's not because they want to destroy the Roman Empire. In fact, quite the opposite is true. Most of these barbarians are interested in coming into the Roman territory because they like what the Roman Empire stands for. They see the lifestyles of the people living in the Roman Empire, and they think, hey, that's a better lifestyle than we have. We want to come to the country and want to be Romans too. But in this process of kind of uncontrolled immigration, you're going to see some problems emerge. On this map, we see how barbarian migrations are going to affect the western part of the empire. We can see how there are different groups of barbarians that are coming in here, and we have the Franks that are going to come into the parts of modern-day France. You have the Vandals that are coming down into France, down into Spain, eventually into North Africa, where they're going to take over the city of Carthage that had been rebuilt. The new city of Carthage, you have various Gothic groups, the Ostrogoths, the Visigoths, that are going to come down into Italy, later into Spain. You have the Angles and the Saxons and the Jews that are coming into Britain, and this is going to be causing stress on the Roman Empire. And eventually these groups that are coming into the empire, they're not just coming for a visit. They're going to come in and they're wanting to settle in the empire. And so as more and more of them are settling in the western part, they're starting to take over this western part and take that control away from the Roman emperors and kind of put it into their own Germanic kings. A good example of the problems that these barbarian migrations can cause is in looking at the story of the Visigoths. So the Visigoths are very interested in coming into Rome because they want protection from the Huns. The Huns are a very fierce tribe of barbarians, and the Huns were moving westward. The Visigoths wanted to basically get out of their way. So they're looking to Rome as kind of an area of safety and maybe, an area that could protect them against the Huns. So they basically offer to join the Roman military. They'll provide military service together with the Roman army to fight against the Huns to keep them out of Roman territory if the Romans would allow the Visigoths to come in. And and settle in the Roman territory and kind of pay them for this military service. Well, the emperors at the time were interested in getting some assistance in fighting off the Huns as well, so they agreed to the proposal. However, the Roman empires did not keep up their side of the bargain, especially when famine breaks out. They were not providing the Visigoths with food and the land that they could use to maybe grow some food on. They're not giving that to the Visigoths, and so that got really bad. And there's accounts of, the Visigoths, some having to sell their children in slavery because they simply couldn't afford to feed them. And things got so bad that they eventually rebel against the Romans. And this leads to a major battle, the Battle of Adrianople, in the year 376. You don't have to know the date of this battle, but the emperors very foolishly decide to take part in this military battle instead of waiting for reinforcements. And the emperor gets killed by the Visigoths. And so it's this major blow that the barbarians have managed to kill the Roman emperor. The Visigoths would then basically be left to start roaming around the area of modern-day France. And again, they settled into this system that they would kind of be allowed to settle the Roman territory in exchange for military service. But again, tensions between the Visigoths and the Western Emperor were, pretty high. And when, again, the emperor wasn't seeming to be doing what he promised, one of the Visigoth kings, a man by the name of Alaric, leads a group of his Visigoths down into Rome. They sacked the city in the year 410. Now, the Roman emperors, even the ones in the Western Empire, had been living in Rome for a while. So this is not, how do you put it? It's not a major blow. Well, they hadn't been living in Rome. But it is, a big deal ideologically, not so much economically, because Rome is not really the center of the empire anymore. But culturally and physiologically and psychologically, the Roman city that had founded this empire has now been sacked by the barbaric Germanic people. And we should note that the Visigoths, are not crazy or anything. They basically are just stealing a bunch of stuff that they found in Rome. They weren't massively destroying the city, but still the fact that they had taken the city of Rome itself just kind of represents that the Roman government was completely out of control of the western part of the empire. As the Germanic groups continued to pour into the western part of the empire, eventually they were in such large numbers that they were able to push the Western Emperor out of power, and the last Western Roman emperor was removed in the year 476. You can see that I put this date in red because it's one of the few dates that I'd like you to know. This is the kind of, a classic date for the fall of the Roman Empire in the West. A Roman emperor who is ethnically Roman from this point onward, never sits as emperor of Rome again. This power really falls into the hands of the Germanic kings. And one of them is a king named Theodoric the Great. And he likes to be called Theodoric, and he's king of the Ostrogoths, and he becomes king of Italy in the year 493, and really takes over from the last Western emperor. And he kind of establishes himself by basically killing off the guys, and kicking the emperor off the throne and then taking over all of Italy. Now, what's interesting here is if we look at this picture of Theodoric, he does not look like what we would imagine a Germanic barbarian would look like. In fact, he looks quite Roman. He's dressed in kind of Roman clothing. He's holding a scroll, which points to some literacy. He's sitting on the Roman-style throne. He's writing his name in Latin. And we really see during his reign that he's preserving Roman culture. Now, you might be wondering, well, how does this dramatic barbarian king manage to do this? Germanic barbarian king do this? Well, it's because the Germanic barbarian king had lived most of his life in Constantinople. And so really Theodoric had been raised as a Roman, even though he was of Germanic ancestry. So when he becomes king of Italy, he just continues to preserve Roman culture and rules like a Roman king would rule the area, but in fact, he's a barbarian. And so this is what we see happening. The power is now shifting from the Roman armies who have pulled out of the west. They moved back to protect Constantinople. And now you have this power vacuum being filled by the Germanic kings. If you look on the map, you can see how the takeover ends up going. You have the Ostrogoths that are going to be in the area around Italy. You have the Burgundians that are starting in southern part of France, the Visigoths in Spain, and you have the Vandals in North Africa. And these are going to be the Germanic kingdoms. As we noted at the beginning, The historians kind of debate whether we should call this the fall or just the decline. And part of that is also connected to the fact that even if you would assert that Rome falls, it only falls in the western part of the empire, because the eastern part continues on. The eastern half of the old Roman Empire survives. Historians have given it a new name. They begin calling it the Byzantine Empire, and basically just call it something else to kind of represent that it's not the old Roman Empire. But this is simply the eastern half of the old Roman Empire that has survived. And in fact, this part of the empire will survive all the way until 1453, when it's conquered by the Ottoman Turks. So in a way, the Roman Empire really doesn't fall. At least part of it survives for, another 1,000 years, almost after the last for almost another 1,000 years after the last Roman emperor of the West was removed from power. Now, some more recently, we should note, just in the sake of fidelity to the historical profession, that a lot of historians have pointed out the Romans who lived in the eastern part of the Roman Empire never used the term Byzantine to talk about themselves. That's what we call them. They called themselves Romans. And so some people have argued that we should follow their example and just call them the Eastern Romans. We don't really tend to do that. I find it a little bit more confusing. I like having a totally different title, because when you say Byzantines, I immediately know what you're talking about. If you say Eastern Romans, it can be confusing. But the Romans living there during the time of Diocletian in the western part of the empire, are they Eastern Romans? Are they Byzantines? Well, so from this point forward, after the fall of the West, they really are called the Byzantine Empire. Now, one of the most famous Byzantine emperors was a man by the name of Justinian, and Justinian is well known for his trying to restore the glory of the old Roman Empire. He does this first by fighting military campaigns to reclaim territory from those barbarian groups that had taken it away. He begins by fighting in North Africa and manages to take away territory that had been taken over by the Vandals. He starts a campaign that will last about 20 years of fighting in Italy to take back that territory from the Ostrogoths. And he is able to be successful, and he does begin the process of trying to restore the old territory of the entire Roman Empire. However, note that Justinian's empire is nowhere near the size of the old Roman Empire. He's not able to fight against the Franks that had taken over France, nor can he go after the Visigoths of Spain. He certainly never even gets close to the Angles and Saxons that are in England. So, hey, it's a step towards restoring the old Roman Empire, but it's not completely successful, or is it going to last? In addition to trying to restore the old Roman Empire through territory, Justinian also tries to restore the glory of the Roman Empire through his other accomplishments. When it comes to the law, Justinian reorganizes the legal code and produces a new set of laws called the Justinian Code. Essentially, what he and his scholars do is they go through all the laws on the books and they get rid of all the old, outdated ones, like the ones that conflict with each other, and put together a more streamlined, updated version of the law code. And so Justinian will use this to provide some legal stability within the empire. Justinian also tries to restore the glory of the Roman Empire through religion. Justinian would attack heresy. He takes on the title of beloved of Christ, and so he really views himself as a successor to Constantine in terms of what he's trying to do for the Christian church. If we look at this mosaic, you can see that it's an image of the Virgin Mary with baby Jesus, and Justinian on the left has put himself in this image with Constantine. So basically saying, I'm a Christian emperor, just like Constantine. And so part of that, what he is attacking is the heresies and trying to make sure that Christians in this empire follow those orthodox or correct Christian beliefs. He's also engaged in building projects and builds a very famous church called the Hagia Sophia. And that's Greek, so if you translate it, it means the Church of Holy Wisdom. The Hagia Sophia would be his crowning kind of building project, the one he's most proud of. And if we go back to this mosaic, you can see that Constantine and Justinian are giving gifts to baby Jesus. So here Justinian is holding the image of, the Church of Holy Wisdom. So he's giving the Hagia Sophia to Christ. Constantine is giving Constantinople. So one would argue is even a greater gift, but he gets the whole city. Now, if you look at the church today and you can see the interior view here, you might notice that there's no longer a Christian church here. You can see an Islamic symbol right here. That's because the Byzantine Empire was overthrown by the Ottomans, who were Muslim, and the church of Hagia Sophia was converted to a Muslim mosque. So if you go there today, it's a mosque. But the Muslims, when they took it over, they did not destroy the artwork in the church. So that's why we have these mosaics here that have survived. Well, Justinian was successful at trying to revive some of the old glory. He was not able to ensure that this would last permanently. The Byzantine Empire, after the death of Justinian, would suffer from what I personally call the Humpty Dumpty effect. That, all the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put it back together again. And that's really what happens with the Byzantine Empire. Justinian tries to put the empire back together. He's trying to revive the glory, the prosperity, the stability, but he really can't put it back together. And Justinian is not able to fully put the empire back together. And once he dies, we see that what he did gain is going to slowly disintegrate over time. Again, this process is going to take nearly 1,000 years, but the issue is that the Byzantine Empire is going to face persistent foreign threats. Some of these from Germanic groups that are coming to threaten the empire. For instance, after Justinian's death, the Lombards, a Germanic group, are going to raise an army. They're going to end up going back into Italy and taking that territory away. Another territory is going to be taken by the Avars and the Bulgars that are coming into this part of the world and attacking the Byzantine Empire, which we'll talk about in our next series of lessons. And then the Islamic Empire is going to arise in Arabia, and that's going to end up taking over North Africa. But it's really going to start to take on a massive amount of territory away from the empire. So if we look here, by the time we get to the year 814, the Byzantine Empire is this area, this dark orange area. And it's shrinking. The Byzantines are able to keep it from completely being overrun, in part because they do have some helpful military technologies, primarily the technology known as Greek fire. Greek fire was a flammable liquid that when you sprayed it, they tended to use it in naval warfare. You would spray it on enemy ships and you would set them on fire. Nobody really knows the recipe for Greek fire, but the last person that did know it died, and so he lost the secret. But it was likely a combination of like phosphorus and stuff like that, so that you couldn't put it out by dumping water on it, and it would continue to burn, which is why it's effective in naval battles, because you could just put it on the water and set things on fire on the water. And it did help protect them to some extent, at least protecting Constantinople for quite some time. But really, the Byzantine Empire is not able to protect its territory because it simply was too much. It was too expensive for them to field a military to protect it, and these other parts of the territory are going to continue to fall to these threats. But it's going to go through this process of deterioration. Despite all of this, the Roman Empire is going to leave a very big legacy on our civilization, and there are several legacies that they're going to have outlast them. They are going to preserve Greek and Roman knowledge in the West. We find that during the early Middle Ages, the western part of the Roman Empire goes into kind of a dark age where there's not much literacy, there's not much learning, because the Germanic tribes and the barbarian groups are not the most educated people, and all the educated people are leaving the West and going to Constantinople. However, what's going to happen is that in the High Middle Ages, people from Western Europe are going to be able to rediscover this Greek and Roman knowledge, and they start to increase contact with the Byzantine Empire during the time of the Crusades. And we're going to see a lot of this knowledge come back to the western part of the old Roman Empire. So this is going to be one of Rome's legacies. Its knowledge will have a major impact on Western civilization. Another part of Rome's legacies is that these Germanic barbarians come into the Roman territory and settle down. They gradually convert to Christianity, and this allows them to integrate with the Romanized population, at least the part of it that remains behind and lives in the area. We're going to see that the Western civilization, even though these Germanic barbarians come into the West, that Christianity is still going to become one of the major cultural markers of Western civilization. And then finally, what we can say is that the Roman Empire will, throughout the Middle Ages, be this idea that people will be striving to recreate. Although we know that there were good times in the Roman Empire, there were several that were not so good times. During the Middle Ages, the Roman Empire is really idealized this time of political stability and economic prosperity. And this really becomes, for the Middle Ages, that quest that people will go on, that they try to be reviving the political stability and economic prosperity they imagined that the people enjoyed during the Roman Empire. So again, as we go through and look at the Middle Ages, we're going to see how people are trying to get back to this time of Rome, because they idealize it as a golden age in which to live. And so even as Rome falls in the West, we're still going to have a major impact on the development of these Western civilizations. This is going to bring us an end to the Roman Empire, and I appreciate and we will pick back up with the Middle Ages in our next module.